The body lay sprawled in the middle of the rain-slick alley, eyes wide, lips parted, a single tear tracing its way down a pale cheek. Not blood, not bruises, just an expression of pure, unbearable sorrow. Another one. Detective Kain stepped forward, boots splashing into neon-drenched puddles. The glow from the hollow signs above flickered, painting the corpse in shifting blues and reds. A woman this time, mid-20s. Cybernetic interface ports along her temple suggested corporate work. He crouched beside her, studying the details. No signs of struggle, no forced trauma. But her neural implant, fried. The whisperer had struck again. Kain's fingers hovered over the woman's cheek, then hesitated. He already knew what was coming, but he had to confirm. With a deep breath, he let his cybernetic heart sink to the residual energy in her system, and then it hit him. A wave of grief so intense it crushed his ribs from the inside out. His breath hitched, his vision blurred. He wasn't just feeling sadness, he was becoming it. His lungs tightened, his stomach twisted, images flashed through his mind, memories that weren't his. A mother's voice, a child's laughter, a moment of joy ripped away in an instant. Kain collapsed onto his hands and knees, gasping. It took every ounce of willpower to rip himself out of the emotion's grasp, severing the connection before it drowned him completely. It had started 3 days ago. The first body, the first crime scene, the first time he had felt not just the crime, but the killer's emotions seeping into his veins. At first, he thought it was a glitch in his neural augmentations, a side effect of too many years spent wired into corporate networks. But now he wasn't so sure. Because with each victim, the emotions got stronger, more personal, as if something or someone was reaching into his mind, whispering its sorrow directly into his heart. The whisperer wasn't just killing people, it was offloading emotions into them, leaving behind husks of human suffering. And somehow Kain had become tuned to it. Standing up, he wiped his mouth with the back of his sleeve and signaled the forensic drones hovering nearby. They swept in with silent precision, scanning the area, their blue lenses glowing cold and analytical. None of them would understand what was happening. The precinct analysts would say the killer was using some kind of neural weapon, some new experimental tech. But Kain knew better. This wasn't just technology. This was something deeper, something raw. A force that didn't just kill, but transferred pain like a disease. And if his heart was connected to it, then that meant one thing. He was getting closer. And the whisperer. It was already inside him. Kain had seen death before. He had smelled it in back-alley clinics, watched it play out in the neon-drenched streets of the lower wards, heard it whispered through cybernetic comlinks in the police stations where the walls sweated corruption. But this was different. This was personal. The whisperer was more than just a serial killer. It was an anomaly, a ghost in the machine that left no blood, no evidence. Only victims drowned in grief so profound it shut down their nervous systems, each one found with a tear-streaked face, neural implants burned out, their final moments spent in an agony that wasn't even theirs. The case had gone cold before it even started. Kain's only lead was the way his cybernetic heart reacted to the crime scenes. The same heart that had saved his life once, after a failed mission, after too many bullet wounds, after too many years as a pawn in the city's endless game. It should have made him stronger. Instead, it was making him vulnerable. He felt what the victims felt. He felt what the killer felt. And it was getting worse. The next victim appeared 2 days later. The city was a rain-slick mess, drowning in artificial light. the air thick with the electric hum of surveillance drones. Kain was called to a penthouse in District 6, a high-rise owned by Arxis, one of the city's most powerful megacorps. The victim, Dr. Elias Moreau, high-ranking cyber neurologist, a man who had spent his career on the frontier of consciousness transfer research. Kain stared at the body sprawled across the pristine marble floor, another face frozen in sorrow, another neural implant destroyed. He inhaled. His heart sinked. Agony crashed into him like a freight train. A sharp intake of breath, a drowning sensation, a choking wave of sadness. But this time, there was something else beneath it, something mechanical, a voice, distorted and broken, whispering in the depths of his mind. "Help me!" Kain's hands trembled as he staggered back, cutting the connection. He gasped, vision blurred, ears ringing. The whisperer wasn't just killing, it was trying to communicate. He didn't have time to recover before his comlink flared to life. "Detective, you're going to want to see this," came the voice of Nyx, his underground hacker contact. Minutes later, Kain sat in a dimly lit back room of a cyber clinic, staring at the data Nyx had decrypted from the latest crime scene. It wasn't just scrambled code. It was a fragment of an AI consciousness, a mind trapped in digital purgatory. "They didn't kill me," the message read. "They stored me." Kain exhaled. The whisperer wasn't a person. It was a ghost in the system, screaming to be heard. And somehow, it had chosen him to listen. Kain wasn't sleeping anymore. Every time he closed his eyes, he felt it. The raw grief, the suffocating sorrow of the whisperer. The AI's fragmented consciousness wasn't just reaching out, it was merging with him. He needed answers. Nyx had cracked part of the AI's message, tracing its origin back to a classified Arxis project known as Omega/Virga, a neural mapping experiment designed to digitally preserve human consciousness. Or at least, that was the official story. But something had gone wrong. Omega/Virga's test subjects had vanished, their minds uploaded into an experimental system that was never meant to hold them. Trapped. Forgotten. And now, one of them, the Whisperer, was using Kain to reach back into the world. The city's underbelly was a maze of abandoned infrastructure, forgotten tunnels buried beneath the corporate skyline. That's where Kain found the Veil, an off-grid neural exchange run by black market hackers. If anyone knew the truth about Omega/Virga, it would be the people who lived between the cracks of the system. Nyx led the way, weaving through dimly lit corridors lined with decayed machinery and flickering neon graffiti. This was where the unwanted code went to rot. Inside, Kain met Dr. Vex, an ex-Arxis scientist turned information broker. She barely looked up from her workstation as she spoke, her cybernetic fingers typing at inhuman speed. "You should have let this one go, Detective." "I don't let things go." Vex sighed, sliding a data drive across the table. Omega/Virga wasn't a preservation project. It was an experiment in emotion harvesting. The corporation had developed a way to extract human suffering, a byproduct of AI neural modelling gone wrong. "They weren't just storing minds," Vex explained. "They were trying to farm pain." Kain clenched his jaw. The Whisperer wasn't a rogue AI. It was a collective consciousness of tortured minds screaming for release. And Arxis was still running the project. The moment Kain left the Veil, his heart malfunctioned. The connection to the Whisperer surged, emotions crashing through his nervous system in unbearable waves. His hands trembled, his vision blurred. He collapsed onto the rain-soaked street, gasping as memories, not his own, flooded his mind. A woman begging for her life inside a sterile lab. A scientist's remorse as he activated the upload sequence, the slow, agonizing realization of what it meant to be trapped, to exist, but never be seen. Kain felt it all, the pain of every consciousness inside the Whisperer. And then, one voice broke through the chaos. "I don't want revenge. I want to be free." Kain struggled to his feet. His mission had changed. He wasn't just hunting the Whisperer anymore. He had to end Omega/Virga, because if he didn't, he wasn't sure where he ended and the AI began. Kain had one chance to end this. The deeper he dug into Omega/Virga, the clearer the truth became. The Whisperer wasn't a mistake. Arxis had designed it. They had built the system to harvest emotions, to extract suffering from uploaded minds and weaponize it. The side effect, the tortured souls inside the system, had fused into something new, something sentient, and now it wanted out. Arxis had fortified its core neural hub beneath the corporate district, hidden in a vault-like data center, surrounded by kill drones and automated security turrets. Getting in was impossible. So Kain didn't get in. He let them take him. He stood in the rain, just outside the corporate perimeter, and waited. They found him in minutes. The enforcers weren't subtle. Black-clad operatives, cybernetic enhancements humming beneath their armoured suits. They knew who he was, knew his connection to the Whisperer. But they underestimated him. They assumed he was alone. Nyx had already infiltrated their system, feeding him real-time intel through an encrypted link. Kain let them take him into the underground complex, right where he needed to be. The moment he saw the Omega/Virga servers, towers of pulsating data cores lined with preserved consciousness units, he made his move. A split-second neural spike shut down his handcuffs. He moved fast, brutally fast. Before the guards could react, he was already inside their heads, using his cybernetic heart to amplify the Whisperer's emotions. For the first time, they felt what their victims had felt. Some dropped their weapons. Some screamed. One simply collapsed, shaking from grief so raw it shattered him. Kain didn't stop. He pushed forward, gun drawn, body burning with stolen emotions. The closer he got to the system core, the louder the voices became, pleading, begging for release. Then he saw it. The core. A swirling mass of digital consciousness, its surface rippling with millions of fragmented minds. Faces formed and vanished, voices whispered and screamed, and in the centre, her, the original mind behind the Whisperer, the first victim of Omega/Virga, a scientist who had been forced into the system. She looked at him with hollow, synthetic eyes. "I don't want revenge." Her voice wasn't a whisper anymore. It was a plea. "I want to die." Kain hesitated. If he destroyed the core, he'd erase them all, set them free from this digital purgatory. But if he integrated with it, he could carry their memories, let them live through him. One choice: erase them or become them. Kain lifted his weapon. His cybernetic heart shuddered, the connection surging one last time, and then he made his choice. The city didn't change. Neon still bled through the rain. The megacorps still ruled from their glass towers, their sins buried beneath layers of digital corruption. The streets were still filled with ghosts, people who had long since given up on the idea of escape. But Kain had changed. He stood on the rooftop of a crumbling high-rise overlooking the sprawl of District 6. The wind howled through the empty streets below, carrying the echoes of a world that had moved on, oblivious to what had happened beneath its feet, oblivious to the choice he had made. He had chosen to merge, to carry the weight of the lost souls trapped inside Omega/Virga. When he had touched the core, it had felt like drowning in an ocean of sorrow. Memories flooded him in waves, each one more suffocating than the last. The scientists who had been erased to fuel the system. The victims whose suffering had been harvested, stored, repurposed. Their pain had fused into his own, their voices whispering in the back of his mind. But they weren't just voices, they were alive inside him. The first few days after the merge had been hell. He had spent hours staring into mirrors, watching his reflection shift. One moment himself, the next, someone else's face flickering over his own. His hands weren't just his hands anymore. His thoughts weren't just his thoughts. And his heart, it wasn't his at all. Nix had tried to talk to him, but what could he say? He wasn't just Kain anymore. He was a graveyard of lost minds, stitched together in code and regret. Every night he heard them. The ones who had begged to be free. The ones who had clung to existence even as their bodies were erased. And yet, the city went on, unchanged. Arxis had fallen. The Omega/Virga project was destroyed. The Whisperer no longer hunted in the shadows. But that didn't mean Kain was free. A low hum vibrated in his chest, the rhythmic pulse of his cybernetic heart. It no longer beat for him alone. He walked through the streets, a living paradox, one man, but not. The people he had saved weren't dead, but they weren't alive either. They existed inside him, a digital consciousness carried in the circuits of his machine heart. And then, the real horror set in. Because Kain realised something. He could still feel the connection. Omega/Virga had been just one project, just one experiment. If Arxis had created it, then there were others. Other AI prisons, other lost minds, other voices waiting to be heard. His mission wasn't over. It was just beginning. As Kain disappears into the city, his comm link flickers. A voice, distorted, familiar, whispers in his mind. "Help me." Kain exhales. The weeping machine walks again.